Hi, everybody. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer here from North Carolina. Our special guest today is a law professor, Professor Brian Tamanaha, who is a tenured law professor at Washington University School of Law. And he is currently in Hawaii, which is where he grew up, and he's there on his summer vacation, but he is taking time out of his busy schedule to speak with us today about his book, which came out in 2012, but I think it's still very relevant today, called Failing Law Schools. And this is like such a wonderful book. I highly recommend it to anybody who is considering going to law school, or even if you're in law school already. This is like one of the best books I've read recently. And when I was reading it, I kept feeling like I wanted to quote so many of the paragraphs that he has in this book. So we'll talk to him about this, as well as his own legal career and whether he thinks going to law school is still worth it in 2021. So I will bring on the professor here, and you can see the beautiful background here in Hawaii too. Hi, Professor Tamanaha. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. Okay. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your family background? I read that your parents were teachers and you were born and raised in Hawaii.
Yes, I grew up in Hawaii. They were just regular school teachers, and I went to a public school like everybody else, and made my way into law school. I had always been interested in becoming a lawyer, and then ultimately a law professor.
I see. And so you went to college at University of Oregon, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Did you go to law school right after college?
I did. I went directly from University of Oregon to Boston University. Mm-hmm. After that, I clerked for a federal judge in Virginia, and then I returned to Hawaii to become an assistant federal public defender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. So what made you choose Boston University? It was probably sort of like culture shock, right? From Hawaii to Boston?
Yeah, it was. My dad taught American history, so I heard a lot when I was a kid about Boston and about Virginia. So I just applied to law schools in Boston and Virginia. Literally, that was it. This was in the time way before U.S. News, and there wasn't really a lot of focus on rankings or anything like that, so I didn't really think too much about it. So it was really just a kind of serendipity that led me there.
I see. Yeah, and did you have to take out loans to go to Boston University?
I did. I took out loans all 3 years to go to BU. My parents helped, but they didn't have a lot of money, but they still helped as well. And then in addition, the law firm job that I had in my summer of my second year, I earned enough to help pay for a significant part of the third year. So that actually was a very big help. It was at a time where tuition was about $5,000 a year. So
$5,000 a year? Wow. 5, when was this? Like in the early 80s or mid-80s?
It was in the early 80s. That's correct. Yes.
Wow. That's amazing, because I do recall in your book you were mentioning how, and I also mentioned this in one of my YouTube videos, that the cost of law school tuition, particularly at private schools, even the lower ranked private schools, is just ridiculous now, like close to $70,000 a year or more than $60,000 a year. So it's just really hard these days for most students to just work during the summer at a big law firm, if they could even get such a job, and then, pay off most of their law school debt within just like a year or two of graduation. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's one concrete change so I graduated in 1983, and since that time, and even actually before that, the cost of education has increased far in excess of the rate of inflation. But a concrete example of that is really an example of what I just said. I could work just my summer job. I worked the entire summer in a law firm in DC, Hunt & Williams, and that paid for, basically it covered my third year. And that you can't do today, obviously, because the law firm pay has gone up, but not anywhere near close to how much law school tuition has gone up.
Yeah, that's right. And then, did finances affect your decision to go into a certain area of law?
No, it didn't. And that was one of the reasons that I was concerned enough to sit down and write this book, because when I graduated, I didn't really want to work for a law firm. I wanted to be a litigator. I was willing to work either as a prosecutor or public defender. They don't earn a great deal of money. So although I had loans, it wasn't so overwhelming that I felt like I had to go to a firm and pay it off. If I had been if I graduated in these days, I would actually have gone to a law firm just out of concern about my ability to carry the loan. Average loan balances are so high these days. If I had loans at that level, it undoubtedly would have changed the course of my career.
Mm-hmm. I see. And so you went to one of the islands, right, to be a prosecutor, was it?
I was first in Honolulu. I worked as an assistant federal public defender, and then after that, I moved to the Federated States of Micronesia, where it was a newly independent. It had been part of the former trust territories of the Pacific Islands. And I went there, it was about 2 months after they had become independent. So I was an assistant attorney general in a place called Yap State. It was a great job, great experience. There were only 2 lawyers working in the government, so we had to do everything. And as a newly independent state and country, there was really a lot of fundamental legal work to be done.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of cases did you handle?
In that context, I did all kinds of things, both civil and criminal. I also did other things. I did contract work. I advised a couple of the departments. The other attorney and I split up. He was a Yapese. His name's Cyprian Monmao. He's now the chief judge, or not the chief judge. Oh, yes, he is. He's the chief judge of Yap State. So we basically just split everything down the middle. And as a result, I ended up, you would almost analogize it to a general practice. I had to do all sorts of different things.
Oh, wow. Sounds very interesting. But was it also very isolating to be young and fresh, sort of fresh out of law school and then be on this island?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it today. But as you said, I was young. I didn't have any attachments or family responsibilities. So that made it possible. It was an adventure. And I think law students should try to take adventures, or at least graduates should take adventures. And it's easier to do an adventure when you're young than it is when you're older. I didn't have mortgage payments. I still had law school loan payments, but as I said, it wasn't much. I think the loan payment was $200 a month, something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, because you hear law students now, they have to pay over $2,000 a month to pay back their loans. Yeah. And a lot of people I know, like, they don't even pay off their loans until they're well into their 40s. So, yeah.
Right.
So, so then what happened next? Like, where did you go after that?
After working in Yap, I went to Harvard Law School and I got a doctorate in legal philosophy. And then I became a professor first at University of Amsterdam. Then I moved to St. John's University, and then I moved to Washington University about 11 years ago.
Oh, okay. Do you think you're going to stay there? You're tenured, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am going to stay there. I like it a lot. I'm also getting to the point where I'm too old to move. It's just too much trouble.
Oh, I see. Wow. So interesting. So was it hard to get into Harvard? Like, how do you think you managed to get into Harvard?
Well, I was a graduate student and applying to the master's program, and then ultimately I did the doctorate there. By that time, I had a strong practice background. In addition, I had written several articles to get into the master's and doctorate program, which are designed for people interested in teaching. You have to show some interest in academic work. So writing is a big part of that. And I had, by that time, I believe 3 articles that I had already published when I applied to get into the program. And that made a big, that was a significant factor in being admitted.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Well, that's excellent. It must have been nice to be back in Boston again, too, right? Yeah, you were familiar with it already.
It was cold.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to this book because, when I read your book, I don't even know how I heard about it, though. I have no idea, but you probably had heard about JD Underground, which is a website that no longer exists. But I guess Paul Campos probably posted there or something. Like people mentioned him, but I've never talked to him or anything. But your book just kind of encapsulates like all the frustrations that I and my friends and people I know who have gone to law school, and it's just frustrating because like people don't realize that even if you do get that golden ring of going to big law, a lot of times or most of the time people are out of there within a few years. It's not like going to be a lifelong career. Like
Right.
even if you say, well, I'm going to work hard, it's okay, I'm going to work 2,000 hours or 2,000 billable hours a year. Well, you could do that for 5 years and still get booted out of the law firm or laid off anyway. So
That's right.
yeah. I mean, did you ever consider, well, I guess you never had to work for a big law firm other than during the summer, right?
That was it. It's not really the kind of work I was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are people who like it, but one of the considerations for me was that I was very interested in being a trial lawyer, and I was able to do so immediately as a public defender. If you go to a law firm, you have to wait in line behind a whole bunch of other second and third year and fourth, fifth year associates, all of whom also want to get courtroom time. And I just wasn't really interested in doing that. The type of work, if you're going to be a transaction attorney or corporate lawyer, also doesn't really interest me. So I didn't, it's fine work if you like it, but it wasn't to my liking.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. And what kind of spurred you to publish or to start writing this book? I'm assuming it took you many years to put it together because there's so much data in here.
Actually, that was the fastest book I've ever written.
Oh, okay.
The book came out in 2012, but I actually began to write it, if I recall correctly, in the spring of 2011. And I finished it relatively quickly. What caused me to write it was at the time, in 2008, 2009, there was a really significant recession. It's now called the Great Recession. And what happened, I found rather concerning. Many people were laid off. And when people are laid off, one thing that often occurs is that people apply to graduate school thinking, well, I'll wait out the bad economy, I'll get a career change. So law school applications really went up in response, even though the legal market had also contracted. That many people were being laid off from law firms. And in fact, I recall people losing offers at the time. Third-year students who had offers to law firms, the offers were just withdrawn. So what happened is that the law schools increased their class size at a time where the legal profession, the legal market had contracted significantly along with the economic market. And it seemed inevitable, and it was, that 3 years later, each graduating class would have great difficulty getting jobs. The ABA employment rates had fallen down to just over 50%, I believe, if I recall correctly, getting full-time, long-term jobs as lawyers, jobs requiring a law degree. There was significant amount of unemployment among law grads. So all of this was coming to a head at the same time that law school tuition was going up, up, up. And this seemed to me unsustainable, as well as ultimately I felt not fair to students coming into law school. And the fairness part of it has to do with the fact that many law schools were padding their employment statistics. They were not reporting honestly. There are ways to tailor statistics in a way in which you're not literally being dishonest, and yet you have to be highly sophisticated consumer to read the way the statistics were being shaped, to understand that there was some manipulation involved in the numbers that were being presented. So law schools were basically advertising, come to law school, you'll have great economic outcomes. They were raising tuition, and they were admitting more students. All of this was coming to a head. Meanwhile, the legal employment market had significantly contracted. And it was this combination of factors that led me to decide to write the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do have a friend who had gone to Northwestern Law School, and he got laid off by his big law firm and wound up kind of scrambling and had to become a solo practitioner. And last I heard, he had shut down his law practice to just, I don't know, do some sort of non-legal related business. Yeah. So I'm also like, was that around the time that people came up with the term to get Lathamed? Have you heard of that?
Get Latham.
Yeah, because Latham and Watkins, I guess, laid off a ton of people at once. So it became a
they were
term.
alone. I mean, this happened, and this happened across the corporate law market. I mean, there were some firms that hung on to people. There were other firms that paid people to delay their taking the position for a year. Firms tried to accommodate, but some firms just straight up said, "No, we're letting you go." And the overall, I mean, often we talk about the corporate legal market, but I think it's important to keep in mind that most law graduates don't actually go into corporate law, because even though quite large number do. So the legal market generally contracted. So there was pain across the board. There were, I don't remember the numbers now, but there were significant levels of unemployment straight out. That is not, I'm not just talking about law firms. I'm talking about no jobs for law graduates after having spent 3 years in law school and a substantial amount of money.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I have a relative who went to UNC Law School and, after having almost 5 years of experience working for a mid-sized law firm, moved to another state and just absolutely could not find a job whatsoever other than a part-time contract job that wanted to give her $20 an hour, $20 an hour for 30 hours a week, no benefits. So that relative decided to do document review instead, and now no longer even has a law license. So, so it's like all these anecdotes and everything, but, I just really feel that even now, now it looks like the law schools do have to give a lot more data or specifics about their employment numbers, but it still seems like they could still kind of like lie or exaggerate about things, because even when they say JD required, well, there are some document review projects that require you to have a JD too. So that doesn't really mean anything to have a JD required job. It doesn't mean that you're making a lot of money either. So
well, after the book was published, and not specifically because of the book, but because there were a number of criticisms that were there was high profile criticism. Senator Boxer, I believe, was one of them, of the ABA and of the statistics. There were significant reforms that were implemented, requiring much more detailed reporting by law schools. So the amount of information available today is a vast improvement over what existed at the time. That said, you still have to be a sophisticated consumer, and I think that's a part of the issue that many seniors in college don't know how, first of all, how to access the information, but then secondly, how to understand it. So I wouldn't say that the kind of manipulation I was concerned about, statistics, really exist today. It's more about educating people. And I think the key sort of source of information should be pre-law counselors at colleges that tell students, look, this is what you need to look at. For example, what I say to anyone who calls me, and people call me because of the book. I mean, students, I don't know. They're just random people out there. I tell them to go on the ABA legal education website, statistics website. And one important, there are two types of statistics. One set are overall aggregate statistics. But for the purposes of a student thinking about going to law school, a very, very important source of information, in fact, I would say the most important source that they should look at, are the individual law school reports. So each law school publishes statistics every year. And the statistics are both, the profile of the students, median LSAT, median GPA, class size, and so forth. But the critical information is about employment results. And now it's just one sheet. But so let me just, for anyone who's listening who might be interested in understanding how it works, the way to evaluate or to judge the strength of the degree that you're getting, the economic strength of the degree, is about placement. That is, what percentage of graduates are getting full-time jobs as lawyers? That's number one. And then what kind of jobs those jobs are. And this is just a kind of general rule of thumb that I'll say, that the employment statistics where a significant number of graduates get jobs in large law firms, even if you don't want a job in a large law firm. Schools that have significant percentage of jobs, placement of graduates in large law firms, reflects strength of the law school placement. That is, some schools will have 80% of people in law firms, 70% of people in large law firms. By large law firms, I mean 250, 500 and above. And some schools have 2%. And if you look at that, I'll just tell you, that alone is telling you that the placement of the 2% is very weak. And it's not, again, I want to repeat, it's not because I'm suggesting you should want to go to a large law firm, although those are the best paying jobs. What I'm saying is lots of people do want to get them. So if only 5 or 2% get those jobs, that means it's only the best students, and many people are not landing. So it's just a rough rule of thumb I'm going to suggest to people. First of all, every student thinking about applying to law school should download, of the 5 or 10 schools that they are looking at, the employment statistics form. It's just one sheet of paper. Look at the percentage of people with full-time jobs as lawyers, step one. And then step two, look at the percentage of people who obtain jobs in large law firms. And then just do a comparison among the schools that they're looking at, and the pattern that I've just described will become evident to people who do this. And this, for me, would be just basic due diligence on anybody planning to go to law school today. If you're planning to go to law school today, you need to do some homework. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. Given the expense, given the nature of the legal employment market, you can't just do it on faith that everything will work out. And unfortunately, too many people do that. Although I believe there's a lot more awareness now than there was, a decade ago when I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And did you follow that lawsuit that was filed by, I think, Hannah Alberta versus Thomas Jefferson School of Law?
Yeah, I did, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then ultimately, didn't the judge say that, well, you prospective law school students are supposed to be sophisticated consumers and you're better educated than the normal Joe Schmoes, so you should have known better?
Yeah, well, I think that was a bit unfair, partly because law students, prospective law students, people applying to law school, trusted law schools to be honest about their employment statistics. I don't know. I wouldn't have assumed if I was a college senior that I should be worried about the law school fudging their numbers or manipulating their numbers in a way that that would be fooling me. So if you had looked at it in context, I certainly wouldn't have blamed the unsophisticated consumers for not watching out for manipulative employment statistics. I just wouldn't have expected that schools would be doing that. Now, again, I want to repeat that was 10 years ago. This problem, I believe, has been significantly reduced. Now, the overall nature of the market still has issues, but we've at least solved the problem of misleading employment statistics. I actually don't think that's an issue anymore, although it was at the time I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about now? Like, do you ever think about updating your book, or like, has your opinion changed since writing it in the last 9 years?
The fundamentals of the situation, putting aside the manipulative employment statistics, which have been resolved, the fundamentals of the situation have not changed. And I don't have anything to add to that point that I made in the book, but let me give you what the fundamentals are. That tuition continues to go up, that tuition and the debt that people take out to go to law school can be managed if you get a job in a large law firm. You will earn enough money if you're disciplined to pay that loan back and then have a career that you would like to do thereafter. But many people, and I'm going to say again, the majority do not get jobs in large law firms. And so as a result, tuition continues to go up, debt burdens continue to rise, and the employment market is very tight. One of the things that law schools are advertising now is that much higher percentages of law graduates are getting jobs as lawyers, and that's true. But it's true for a very specific reason. That is, following the publication of the book, 2012, 2013, 14, there was a sharp reduction in the number of people applying to law school. And as a result, 3 years thereafter, the number of graduates of law school started going down. So ultimately, the number of law grads dropped by close to 25%, something like that, over the span of years. Meanwhile, so as a result, the percentage of graduates obtaining full-time jobs as lawyers went up. But the important thing to recognize is that the raw number of actual jobs did not go up. So let me tie together what I'm trying to say. A higher percentage of grads are getting jobs as lawyers these days, but not because there are more law jobs, but because there are fewer law grads. That's the bottom line. Now, my concern is that up until recently, that the decline in the number of applicants to law school has held steady. But last year, and then significantly this year, the number of applicants to law school has gone up. Now, there's always a 3-year lag. So if law schools admit more students, as I expect will occur, because there are more applicants, then 3 years from now, there'll be more graduates going into the market looking for jobs. And unless the number of law jobs increases, the unemployment rate will go up, simply because there are more law grads chasing the same number of jobs. So that's the situation. And, and I'm trying to give you an overall picture. Fundamentally, I don't think any of that has changed. Things got better, but got better for reasons not directly related to what law schools have done, but more related to the number of applicants, the number of people wanting to go to law school going down. And that's really what's driving things at this moment, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And I wish I actually think the situation was relatively acceptable. And unfortunately, I'm concerned now that the number of applicants has begun to rise and quite substantially.
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily, a few law schools have closed down in the last decade, too. And I think with more word getting out about how, getting a JD is not going to be like a direct path to being rich or even being gainfully employed. Like I myself felt grossly underpaid or underemployed for years until I finally had to start my own solo law practice. And I really considered leaving the practice of law. And, one thing you didn't mention one thing you did mention is that it does seem like getting a legal education is really becoming more like some sort of like thing for the privileged class. Like my parents paid for all of my law school tuition and all of my expenses for college and law school, because otherwise I really couldn't have cut it graduating from Georgetown and being paid a base salary of $22,500, working for a small firm in Northern Virginia, after graduating. I mean, so it is a huge risk, especially for people who are not coming from, families that are well off enough to pay for everything or even pay for half their tuition and expenses.
Right. Yeah. You're raising a really important point that I want to elaborate on just a little, that there are clear economic class-related consequences in the way the system is currently structured. One piece of that is, and this relates to African Americans and Latinos in particular, they have the highest average debt rates. And that's because there's less family support, economic support. So they have to borrow more going into law school. And the way law schools operate, and this is another important thing to say to viewers, is that law schools operate based on a system of charging or pricing in relation to your LSAT and GPA scores. So law schools shape their LSAT in particular, as well as GPA profile. So if you have a LSAT above the median, they'll give you money. And they'll give you money because they want to increase their median as much as possible. If you have an LSAT below the median, they won't give you money. Now, they started giving money all the way through the class when the number of applicants contracted. So at that point, law schools would rather have somebody paying a quarter of the tuition than having an empty seat. So people below the median started getting scholarships as well. I believe that's going to change as the numbers of applicants go up. The point I was trying to make is that in the end, Latinos and African Americans who on average have lower LSAT scores, and that's related to things like the ability to take prep classes, have someone, again, come up with the money to prepare. So as a result, they were getting fewer discounts, borrowing more money, and having to then graduate from lower ranked schools and really face a very difficult job market. If I was from a wealthy family, I'd just go to the best school that let me in because my parents would cover the tuition. But the best school that lets you in will not be giving you a scholarship. They have other students that they're giving scholarships to. So the way the tuition pricing system operates, it has very significant class implications that I discuss in the book, and talk about the fact that we're increasingly coming to the point where the students at the top schools come from elite economic backgrounds, and they have statistics that show this. This is happening, by the way, at the undergraduate level as well. So it's becoming a self-reinforcing system in which if you've got money, you go to the best schools, you get the best jobs. Because you don't have to worry about getting a scholarship. It'll be paid for, and you get all the best prep. So that'll be paid for. The legal profession is highly elitist.
Yep.
This is another thing that I think people going to law school should be aware of. And you can see it on the Supreme Court. They all went to Yale and Harvard, the members of the Supreme Court. So, but it's also true in the Department of Justice. It's true at elite law firms.
Clerkships.
At clerkships as well, that's correct. So the system that we've created, that the wealthy people are filling up elite law schools, and then everybody else is either going to a good state school or going to a lower down ranked law school because they have lower tuition to pay, results in, again, limiting upward mobility, limiting opportunities for the best positions in the legal profession. All of this is wrapped together with what law schools are doing.
I see. Well, could we take some questions or have you comment on some of the people's comments here?
Okay.
I don't know if can you see these comments on the right side?
I do not see any comment.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm the one in control of flashing them up on the screen then. I'm sorry. Okay, well, first, let's go back in time to the first question. This is a student
I do see comments now. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, Pauline wants to know what kind of extracurriculars or programs can I do in high school to prepare for law school or will look good in law school resumes? Well, most of the time they don't care what you do in high school. They might care about what you're doing in college, but if your school has a mock trial or debate team, then I think that would be helpful. What do you think?
Well, let me add that an important thing is your ability to write, arguments. This is what lawyers do. And I think taking any kind of course in high school, honors English, honors history, things that you'd be assigned papers and you have to write, and then hopefully your teachers will give you feedback. So you want to hone your writing and analytical skills as much as possible. But I do agree that it's really about college that matters in terms of law school. High school matters as well, but importantly, as a way of setting you up to perform well in college. So the more you've learned in high school, the better you'll do when you finally get to college.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then No Limit asks, what about going straight out of law school, attending a non-ABA accredited law school and graduating debt-free? Just a thought. And I said it generally sounds like a bad idea to me, and going solo straight out of law school is usually very risky, because how are you going to get any clients? I mean, do you have money saved up to even front the cost to start up a law practice? I think that's not really a great idea.
One other implication of a non-ABA accredited law school is that you will not be able to move to another state and then have your law degree recognized there. That's the main benefit of ABA accredited law schools, that they're recognized at other states, that you're able to take the bar. So if you're in a state, say California, where you think, well, I just want to live in California, then that's not a concern. But if you have any long-term desire perhaps to move and work somewhere else, then that choice will be not allowed if you attend a non-ABA accredited law school.
Mm-hmm. And Professor, did you ever hear, there was some sort of CBS special about law schools, particularly focused on UC Hastings, where the dean back then was Frank Wu, and Frank Wu said that half of the students graduating from Hastings weren't even going to have jobs at the time of graduation. So do you recall ever hearing about that?
Yes, but again, things are better now, and
Yeah.
I think that's important to say. And this was really at the worst time of the market, but it was a very serious thing, and it did go on for several years. So that was a genuine concern. I don't remember the details of it, but I know what he was talking about. And that's not the situation today. But again, I want to give a warning, especially to young viewers there. You have to pay attention to the fact that law school applicants are going up again, because that will have a significant impact on employment outcomes 3 years later. If the number of students who matriculate, that is how many actually come, starts to go up again, the legal employment market will become difficult again thereafter.
Yeah. And Caleb, I think he's the guy that said he did. Caleb, were you the one that said you did document review? I can't remember, and you're trying to get an MBA now. It says, keep in mind, as a solo, you won't be doing sexy legal work, criminal defenses, divorces, child custody. It's a lot of work for a little money. Yeah, well, you can actually make pretty good money doing divorce cases. That's what I do now, a lot of divorce cases. So people are willing to spend money on that, but it is really hard to get the good clients. When I started out, I was 6 years out of law school, and it was still really tough getting good clients. And I dealt with a lot of, kind of dregs of society type cases too. And it was kind of demeaning. So how about for those who have connections? Well, if you have connections in the legal field, then that's great. But the question is still, are they going to actually have enough pool to give you a job? So, you might have connections, but they don't actually have any paying jobs available for you when you graduate. Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, what are your thoughts on getting a JD MBA? I didn't think it was really that necessary, or it's not really going to help you be that much more employable. What do you think, Professor?
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, if your desire is to go do some kind of business-related work, then it may be useful for that purpose. You should be aware that MBA applications are dropping now as well, and part of the reason for it is that the economic value of an MBA is itself subject to lots of questions. I think ultimately it depends on where you're going. If you're at an elite institution, and JD MBA might set you up for a job at McKinsey, a consulting firm, something like that. But just at a kind of local law school, an MBA is just going to cost more money, and it's not going to deliver a great deal of benefit that I can see. certainly if you're going to be a practicing lawyer, the MBA will make no difference at all.
Yeah, I don't even know any practicing attorneys that got such a joint degree. I know one guy that got a JD/Master in Public Health, maybe, or public. Yeah, but it was totally unnecessary. I mean, they do criminal defense. So what do you need a master's degree in public health for to do criminal defense? Yeah. Hi, Khalid. Thanks for being here again. He says his friend just got a job out of law school making $50K a year. She has $250K in law school debt. Any advice? That's pretty general.
Yes. Yeah, I do have advice. That is, the federal government, it depends on what kind of job this person is getting. If the person is working for a public interest organization, then that person will qualify for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which is really, really beneficial. You have to sign up. They can look it up online, and the balance of the loan will be forgiven after 10 years. It's an enormously beneficial program. There's lots of paperwork. You have to stay on top of it. So if that's the kind of job that person has, hang on to it. That's really the only way to get out from under this debt in a reasonably brief period of time. Short of that, there's another government program, and there are variations of it now, but this is what that person should look into. It's a form of called income-based payment. That program will allow that person, your friend, to make monthly payments determined based on income level. Now, it's a little bit complicated, so I'll just say it will save your friend from going into default, which you don't want to do. So the monthly payments are set at a manageable level. That's a very high debt. So I'm going to say it's almost mandatory that your friend look up this program. And that program also has a lot of paperwork, but it'll reduce the monthly payments to a manageable level. Now, here's the difficulty. At that level, your friend will not be paying down on the principal. So the loan balance over time will grow. That'll be a scary thing. But the total loan balance is canceled. I believe it's 20 years now. They've had several proposals to change it. So even in that program, you get out from under the debt at some point. Sure. And if the person finds themselves making lots of money, for example, I don't know, going into becoming a torts lawyer and hitting a big case, they can always pay it off, the loan, in an accelerated level. But this income-based repayment plan will protect any graduate from going into default, which you definitely do not want to do. And because the loan payment levels are set in a formula, in relation to a formula tied to income, the monthly loan payments will be manageable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That's good information. Okay, and then this other person who I guess says that he or she is planning to go independent and had a highest salary offer of $58K as an attorney, I guess. Do you recommend leaving the DC area in order to move to a lower cost of living area where a public interest salary will go further, basically move to the southern US? Well, if you think you can get a job first, yeah, because one sad thing that I discovered when I moved from DC to North Carolina is that the pay was so much less. So, you know, that's where I wound up making $36K starting salary working for a small law firm here in North Carolina. You know, it was years ago, but it was still a big shock to me to see how low the salaries were down in the South too.
Right, and of course you'd have to be willing to live in the South and be happy about it. And so if that doesn't appeal to you, I'm not sure that would be a good decision. But ultimately, it depends on what your alternatives are. I think Judy's right. You know, if you're just going to pull up stakes and think I'm going to get a job no matter what, you may actually be taking on a risk there that the job may not materialize, or at least not the kind of job you thought you'd be eligible for.
Yeah,
it's a very tough call. It's a very tough. DC is a very high cost of living area. You know, lots of people are moving, not just lawyers, but all kinds of people doing all kinds of work are moving to more affordable areas. And that's just as a result of economic factors. I mean, our major urban centers have become really unaffordable for lots of people. And unfortunately, lawyers are included in that group. Nothing about being a lawyer means you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I would also recommend, if you're already in the DC area, at least there are a lot more legal jobs in DC compared to, say, Raleigh, North Carolina, or, Columbia, South Carolina, or wherever you were thinking about possibly relocating to. So maybe try your hardest to get a federal government job. And a lot of those jobs will allow you to, work remotely, like with the Social Security Administration or the Veterans Administration. So it would be pretty awesome to get a federal government attorney position, and then you could live someplace else other than right around DC to save money. Yeah. Okay, so Little Slow says, don't go to an ABA school, bro. All bars may not have been you. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry. DC area has a lot of jobs, just competitive. Oh, okay. So this person, No Limit, asks, hey, Brian, where are you located? Because you have such a beautiful background. It looks like you could do a CBD oil commercial.
I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii. This is looking out the window of my house. I'll just give you a flash of what I was doing this morning. This is on my T-shirt.
Wow.
I was surfing.
Wow.
Now, I had the good fortune of growing up in Hawaii, so this is where my family is and all of my relatives live, or many of my relatives live.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely, becoming a law school professor is probably one of the best jobs in the legal profession, right? Because you get your summers off and you can travel and go places and have visiting professorships.
Let me just say I actually work during the summer, but I'm able to work when I want to. I'm actually working on a book right now. But being a law professor is a great job. And one of the great things about it is we have lots of freedom of what to do with our time, where we have to be. So yes, I feel like I'm in a very privileged position and I'm grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what about some people that think like, well, maybe I'll just go back to school and get an LLM? What do you think about that idea? Because I do know like one person who had gone to a pretty good state school, and I guess he probably didn't have success trying to do a solo practice. And so he decided to go to NYU to get an LLM.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could pay off, but let me just say, you're just doubling down on the amount of money that you spend on your legal education, again, with no guaranteed results. Where I say it will pay off, I think most are specializations that, for example, tax law, and if that person went to NYU, it may well have been for the tax law. That will lead to job opportunities, I think, in ways that some other LLMs won't. There's a bankruptcy LLM. I think that one might be useful. So there's certain specializations, maybe patent law. Now, the bottom line to keep in mind is that you can get all of these jobs without the LLM. So the question you're asking is, well, if I don't have one of these jobs, will an LLM help? And my answer is very specific types of LLMs that are highly specialized might be beneficial. Make sure you look up very carefully the employment results of the graduates of the LLM program. If the school is not providing that information, that should be a big warning to you that they're not very successful in placing grads. So that's a critical consideration. Now, some people who go to a lower down law school want to go get an LLM from a better law school, thinking that it will kind of burnish their degree and make it look better. Maybe, but it won't get you into a law firm. Certainly not, because setting aside the specialty LLMs, not because they don't hire LLM students. They hire routinely through, it's just done the same way everywhere. They give interviews at the end of the first year. They have summer associates during the second year, and they hire out of that. So LLMs are not a part of that ordinary hiring system that we've developed. So I'm not going to say LLM degrees are not worth it. They're actually quite good for foreign students, For many foreign students, they can go back to their home country, studying for a year in the US and getting an American law degree. Can be a positive thing for setting themselves apart from others in their local market. It also allows them to take the New York bar, which allows students with LLMs to sit for the bar. So foreign students have a different set of considerations. For a regular American student who already has a JD, I think it's a generally problematic option, except for specialty LLMs that have decent employment results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even still, I heard recently from someone who just got a tax LLM from University of Florida and, was unemployed, and I had no advice to give because that's not my area of practice either. So, and then of course, Caleb mentions what I hear all the time, that people say, well, JD is so versatile. Well, that just is a euphemism for saying that, hey, you could wind up getting your JD and wind up doing the same job that somebody with a bachelor's degree had, or go back to doing whatever job you had before you went to law school because you can't find a job, like selling insurance or working for a bank or something. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
My honest reaction to this claim that a law degree is versatile is that it's a crock of baloney.
Yeah.
And I think the employment statistics demonstrate this. When people can get law jobs, they take it because they go to law school wanting to be a lawyer. Now, there's some small percentage of people, and I've met them, didn't want to be a lawyer. But most people do. And so the idea that it's versatile and you can do anything with it fails to take into consideration is that you could have done any of those things without the law degree. So why are you paying more money? Law is very technical. It's content. You're learning about administrative law. You're learning about the Uniform Commercial Code. These are not things that are going to help you be a Hollywood writer for a lawyer program. So I do not believe that statement is anything more than puffery by law schools to convince people who really are sitting there with an undergraduate degree thinking, I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll go to law school, to kind of telling them, well, it'll work out even if you don't want to be a lawyer. I don't.
And you'll be $300,000 in debt.
Yeah, exactly. That's the part they leave out.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us a little bit, how are things at your law school? Because, Washington University School of Law has actually jumped up in the rankings over the years, right? Isn't it like in the 20s, like ranked 22 or something in the country now?
Well, my dean would be very disappointed that you said that. It's actually it's ranked 16th.
Oh, sorry. Because I'm thinking about when I was applying. Like, I never thought to apply to Washington University for law school. But,
right. Well, there you go.
Wow. But now, I was like, wow, whatever it was, I saw it like a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like about our school, or two things I like, is the school is relatively small. That is, the number of graduates are just over 200 a year. By way of contrast, for example, to Georgetown, where you went, where the number of graduates is, 500? Is that?
Yeah, it was more like 600 people, or right. I'm just guessing. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, even on JD Underground, people said Georgetown was starting to seem like a diploma mill.
Right, and part of it is not just because they take large entering classes, but they also take a large number of transfers. And it's done for economic reasons. They need the revenue, and they are doing it. One of the problems with a large law school is that you have many classmates you're competing with. There's only so many jobs, even in DC. And by the way, DC also has GW, American, but also all the top law schools are across the country. Many people want to work in DC, so you're not just competing against Georgetown grads. But the point is, with so many grads, it just makes it harder for schools to place everyone. So so Washington University has, I'm not sure what the number is, 210, 220 typically every year that we admit as 1Ls. So I like that. The other thing I like is that WashU gives lots of scholarships all the way through the class. So our increase in ranking that you just mentioned is directly related to this strategy of offering money to attract the best students. That's good for the school and good for the students. So as a result, our average debt level is, I believe, somewhere around 100,000. I looked at it a year ago. It was something like that. And among top 20 law schools, our average debt is I believe, the lowest. And I like that as well, because what it means is, because of the discounts we're giving, students are not leaving with enormous debt. Now, we still do have students with large debt, but on average, the number is, compared to our peer schools, much lower. So from that standpoint, I think we're doing things in a way that still gives people opportunities while also not weighing them down with such burdensome debt.
Do a lot of the students at Washington University stay around that area, or do they tend to go to other states?
No, it's a national school, so we draw from everywhere, but we also place everywhere. So we have lots of students going to New York. In fact, many of our students are from New York, so they're actually going home. They're not staying in St. Louis. We also get a significant percentage of Missouri students, but much less than half. It's not, I don't know what the number is, and they will stay, and they'll have, fairly good opportunities around here. We also place a lot of students in Dallas and Houston, DC, New York. We also place students in LA. I'm just thinking of where my students have been going to. So it's because we draw nationally, we also place nationally. Chicago, we have a fair number of graduates working in Chicago firms.
Oh, that's great. And how much is tuition there now?
Honestly, I did not look at the latest. I believe it's 50, somewhere in the mid 50s.
I see.
The top, but as I said, I think maybe 90% of the class gets scholarships at some level, 85 to 90% of the class.
Oh.
The top tuition now is, so we might be in the 54, something like that. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't actually.
Oh, no problem. People can just go online.
The top tuition now is over 60,000. I believe that's Columbia and Cornell are over 60,000.
Oh, yeah. Georgetown is about 67,000.
Okay. Anyway, I was going to say to students is pay attention to the fact that you have to also pay living, right? It's not just the tuition.
Yes, exactly. And then, well, we're almost at about an hour, but I liked how you ended the book by saying, you would like to tell your colleagues that are critical of your book, well, if your friend said that their child had just gotten into law school and they're of modest means and they're thinking about taking out over $200,000 of loans to send their precious kid to law school, what would you say to them? So similarly, would you tell your kids to go to law school?
Personally, I try to encourage my kids to not go to law school.
Yeah. Same here for myself and my relatives' kids,
Right. I mean,
it's a crapshoot. You could really wind up with bad consequences.
Right. I mean, for some people, it's just their dream. I don't know why. Maybe it was a TV show, or there are people that are also idealistic and think law is a great way to make a good contribution to society. I actually think that's true. That's why I wanted to go to law school. The problem is that the downside risks and the consequences of those risks have become enormous. So it's not that you can't do really good things as a lawyer. You can. Now, lots of lawyers are just doing everyday things, nothing special, but you can still be helping people, or you can work in the government. The problem is that for too many people, it just doesn't work out. And there are many, many success stories, but there are just as significant number of people that leave the profession, not because they're using their so-called versatile degree to do something else, just because it's just not working economically. So that's my concern. There was a time where the price wasn't so extraordinarily high that you'd have a lifetime consequence if your legal career doesn't work out. But that time was decades ago. Now, if it doesn't work out, that debt is something you're going to carry in a very significant way. And although, as you mentioned, a number of law schools have gone out of business, not that many have gone out. So we still have a significant number of law schools producing a significant number of graduates every year.
Yeah. And, just something I want to throw out there. People are probably wondering, why are you guys always so gloom and doom about law school and stuff? But my former brother-in-law was actually a patent attorney with an LLM, and he had been partners. He was a law partner at some law firms around DC, but then he started his own practice and started having financial problems. So he started getting involved with some like shady people on the internet and stuff. So ultimately he was put in federal prison after pleading guilty to money laundering and civil conspiracy or something. So going to law school kind of ruined his life. He should have just been a good Taiwanese boy and gone to medical school like his brother and sister did, and then he'd be set like they are. But instead,
okay. I don't want to use that as an example.
Okay, so that's kind of hyperbole, but it's a true
Right.
story, and I made a video about it, but I took it down because I was afraid some relatives would see it and get mad at me.
I'm sure it's true. And again, I want to say that there are lots of people for whom their dream is to become a lawyer. You can do good things. It's just that for many people, the cost is very high and the job opportunities are difficult. And I think if I could go to law school and not have a significant debt, and it was my dream to be a lawyer, then that would be okay. But it's the debt part. It's the point that it costs so much now that if you're not getting a substantial scholarship, even if you end up with a good job as a lawyer, and by good for me, a good job as a prosecutor, I think that's a great job. I did that. But at $250,000 or $200,000 in law school debt, and by the way, combined law school and undergraduate debt. I mean, lots of people are also carry debt from undergrad. That's a significant burden to carry. I want to, again, I don't want to overdo the doom and gloom. I think there are many people that like being lawyers. I know them and are successful and build upper middle class lives or comfortable middle class lives, and it's all good. It's just that there are others for whom that is not the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be on my show. I know that, you probably have lots of other fun things to do, like get back out there surfing and, enjoying the sun and all the fun things in Hawaii and stuff. But I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and everybody out there in YouTube land who has tuned in. Caleb says, if I could have graduated with no debt, then I wouldn't have cared so much. I learned a lot in law school, met some really great people. It's a great experience. You have to stay realistic. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, things worked out for me, but it was also because my parents had paid for all my law school stuff. Otherwise I'd be like a very bitter person, probably even more so. But what about hefty scholarships to lower ranked schools? How low is too low? Well, I mean, there's always some tiny subset of people who go to low-ranked law schools who still succeed and do great. So right. There are no guarantees. Yeah. I would still rather go to a much higher-ranked law school than to a bottom-rung law school, though. Yeah. And I guess also, Professor, you probably also felt more bold in stating your true opinion since you have tenure, right? Like, did you receive any criticism from your colleagues? Or is that a whole nother subject?
Yeah, well, there were law professors who were not happy with me writing the book. So I think we can leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's hard to be the messenger. I think the book was fundamentally correct, and that my opinion hasn't really changed.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, everybody out there, if you're still considering going to law school, please buy Professor Tamanaha's book. You can find it online everywhere. And No Limit says, I can't wait to purchase your CBD. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. It's about the job offers. Yep, exactly. Because ultimately, people go to law school because they want a job at the end of all of this hard work and taking the bar exam and stuff. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for being on again. And
Okay.
I guess I'll go ahead and end the show. Thank
All right.
you.
Goodbye. Thank you, Judy.
Have a
Goodbye.
great day.